Welcome to the latest Seahawks Draft Blog live stream. Rob Staten and Robbie Williams here. Adam Nathan will be joining us very, very shortly. Robbie, a lot's happened since we came together. I think this is the first time we've actually been on a stream, maybe since Pete Carroll departed, or I think we did one more between Carroll going and Mike McDonald coming in. So why don't you just start by giving us a thought on the hire of McDonald and sort of the coaching hires that have happened since then?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really intrigued by everything they've done. I'm excited about about Mike McDonald and kind of what he brings to the table. There's a lot to be excited about. Again, I think the most you can hope for at this point is to have some hope for the future, and I think this is it. I think this gives us a lot to look forward to, and it's something different. And it kind of feels like when that Rush trade happened. We were all like, the elephant was out of the room or whatever, kind of that monkey on your back kind of thing felt like it was gone, and like excitement for what was next. And then, with Pete still here and kind of things like not feeling all that different. We did have a fun year kind of rooting against the Broncos, and, it was an unexpected year for us as far as Geno starting and such. But I feel like now that this just feels like a whole new fresh regime, like a whole new breath of fresh air and something to look forward to. I'm intrigued by Grubb. I think that was I like that we have a really young staff. I think the Leslie Frazier hire was fantastic. I think adding him to the mix as well gives someone McDonald to kind of lean on, who's got coaching experience. And yeah, man, overall, I'm just really excited.
Let's bring in Adam, who has joined us now, and he can jump on as well. We've got a lot of things to talk about, Adam. So we just started with Robbie's thoughts on the coaching hires. This is the first real opportunity the three of us have had to talk about it. So what do you make of Mike McDonald's appointment and some of the subsequent hires that we've seen joining his staff in terms of coordinators?
I think the most impressive thing I can say about the group so far is that they feel like they've been there for a lot longer than 3 weeks or whatever it is. There's a familiarity already that I feel that we're getting with these guys every time they speak to the media, whether that's on the radio or formal press conferences. But, I mentioned on my show on Friday that a lot of the reason that people seem very upset with their change in scenario was that there's a comfort when you have a head coach for 13, 14 years, and that becomes a very you feel settled, you know the routine, you know the little nuances, you know what they're going to say, what they're going to sound like, and how they're going to explain certain things. And it can be a real shock to the system to have a completely new voice. Well, so many new voices coming in and taking over. But I think the best thing I can say about all of them is that they've come in and they feel like they've been there for months. Every time you hear them, that there's a familiarity already that I think is being built up between them and the fans. And I think that's great so far. I mean, they should be able to win press conferences. They can plan them. They know what they're going to say. And if they can't talk to a few media, reporters, then, God help them speaking to 55 NFL players that are all multimillionaires. But I think so far so good in the sense that they seem really comfortable, and, they feel like they know what they're doing, and they're building something already that feels like what our thing, which is great.
One of the things I've kind of increasingly thought, guys, Robbie, what do you think about this? I get the sense that looking at everybody else's hires, because we've not been through this process for 14 years. And even then, when Pete Carroll was hired, it wasn't really so much of a coaching search as it was they're going to hire Pete Carroll. And it was just a case of dotting the I's and crossing the T's. And so we've not done this in a long, long time, not since I started following the Seahawks, because Jim Mora was announced the year before he took over as well. And when you're going through the process, it's strange. It's kind of the thing you've seen other teams do for years. And then the Seahawks were doing it. And it's very easy to just compare, to look at the other teams who joined you in that process, and to look at not only the head coaches that they appointed, but then to look at their staffs. And there isn't anybody else who went through this process, Robbie, who I'm envious of. And I didn't even include the Chargers in that. I think I know obviously Adam's made his feelings very clear on Harbaugh, but I think if you were to just speak of who was the proven commodity who was hired, Harbaugh was the most proven commodity. So if you were a fan base seeking that, he was the one, really, given that Belichick and Carroll didn't get another job, that you would look towards. When you look at Harbaugh's staff, like Greg Roman's back there as offensive coordinator, Robbie, it just doesn't feel particularly progressive. The thought of, yeah, okay, Harbaugh gets Herbert now and gets to work with Justin Herbert, but Justin Herbert, his offensive coordinator's Greg Roman, just to me feels, I don't know, just like a bit of not a great fit at all, frankly. And then when you look at the Seahawks, they have, a very interesting young head coach. They've appointed a young defensive coordinator with potential who was highly rated in Dallas. They've appointed an intriguing offensive coordinator. I don't think any of us know how Ryan Grubb's going to pan out because he's never been in the NFL, but it's intriguing. There's a mystery there. You kind of look forward to seeing how it's going to pan out. And then they're surrounding him with coaches who are very, very interesting. So Jake Peetz is hire, to go and get Sean McVay's passing game specialist to come and be your passing game coordinator. I mentioned the other day, it feels a little bit like they've found their own version of Tanner Engström there. So that if it works for Grubb and he ends up getting a head coaching job within the next 3 years, they've already got the next man up who could potentially come and lead this offense. Because if it's a success, then you will want succession from within. And not even just him, Charles London coming in as a quarterback coach, he was also name-checked by Peter King as a offensive coordinator in waiting this offseason. Pete's was also on that list and spoke very highly of Charles London as well. So you've probably got multiple candidates for that role on your staff. And it's all a far cry from Pete Carroll having his guys. These are not guys that have just come from Baltimore who are just associated with Mike McDonald with the Ravens. These are guys that have, it's almost as if they're going out and trying to find the best people from within the NFL and college football to build a staff. It's a lot more open-minded. It's exciting. It's interesting. And I can't wait, Robbie, to see it all come together. And I've not felt that way about the Seahawks in years.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of what I was saying earlier. It just kind of gives you hope for the future. And I think, we haven't had that for quite some time. I think there's been a lot of frustrating kind of, we've seen this story over and over play out. And now it gives us something new and different to look at going forward. To answer your original question, how do I feel like compared to other hires? I feel great. There was a moment of panic there for a while, though. If it was like Ben Johnson or Mike McDonald and did we wait too long? And, you were just unsure what the next steps were. And, man, you just really didn't want Dan Quinn, and I feel like that was like the fallback option or like maybe a Vrabel. And those are guys that I didn't really want. So there were some unknowns about what was coming next. And then to get Mike McDonald and then to see what he's been, the staff that they're putting together, you're right. There's a lot of excitement around this and things that we haven't got to feel for quite some time.
Yeah, there just isn't anybody. And, when you hear there was a lot of talk, Adam, about, well, if you hire Dan Quinn, he will build an amazing staff. We've got a super chat on this. I'm going to come to it in a second and you can address it. But even people, when you look at the Falcons, there was all this talk that, with the direction that they've gone in, that their head coach would be able to build an amazing staff. I don't see an amazing staff in Atlanta. I actually look at our staff now, and I admit there was a little bit of, when the offensive and defensive coordinator search just went on perhaps a few days longer than everybody expected, I did sort of think, are they struggling to find people here? But all's well that ends well. A week on, it feels as if they have filled out the staff nicely, and I'm sure that those jobs will continue. But I don't think there's anybody else who's done a better job than the Seahawks so far. And it's very easy to win an off-season. It's very difficult to win NFL games, but I think that the Seahawks have had a good start. This super chat came in from Hawks0. It says, how would you guys feel if the Seahawks had ended up with Dan Quinn, Joe Witt Jr. as the defensive coordinator, and Cliff Kingsbury as the offensive coordinator? How would you feel right now, Adam, if that was the case?
I think the best way I could say is that when on my WhatsApp group someone said, X team is hiring Cliff Kingsbury as offensive coordinator, I responded, what, on purpose? Like, yeah, I think that's kind of sums it up.
Two teams wanted him.
I know, it just absolutely bewildering. And the way in which Washington had to announce Dan Quinn after he'd sort of been seen going through the airport and the Ben Johnson fiasco. I think the best part about what we've done is that it doesn't feel like we've had to compromise in a single spot. they got exactly the guys they wanted to get, probably from the off. I mean, Ryan Grubb wasn't even being discussed as an offensive coordinator, which makes you think that perhaps, you know, they had some intel that they could just go and get that, you know, on the quiet. The defensive coordinator never going to be quite as important, but the one they've gone and got, obviously we've got a little bit of vested interest there too, Rob. It does feel like that was someone they targeted and went and got him because of the slightly obscure nature. You know, anyone could have gone and got a Vrabel to do it or whatever. It does feel like there was a target there and they got him. And even like Scott Huff coming in as the offensive line coach, you know, he was the only coach that Kalen DeBoer kept from the whole of Jimmy Lake's staff in Washington. So, and you saw the work he did with that offensive line. He completely revolutionized them in 2 years to be, I think, the best line in college going, you know, in the regular season last year. So, you know, if we'd gone and got a Dan Quinn, there would have been so much what ifing and who could we. I don't think we have any of that. And I think we can be very clear that the guys they got were exactly who they wanted. And that's such a nice way to start this process, knowing that no compromises have had to be made.
If you have a super chat as well, send them in and we will come to them. That's the best way. If you want to ask us a question or if you want to have a statement, if you want to join in, if you send us a super chat, we'll put it up on the screen. So, Robbie, what's next? With the staff is coming together. Like I said, they're still going to have to make some moves, Robbie. But what's sort of the big next topic? Is it the Geno thing? You know, is that the next big thing? Do you think, you know, the future of Geno Smith? Because it's become the new divisive thing within the Seahawks fan base. You know, we've had stuff like Pete Carroll's future and whether the running game matters in the past. And, you know, Jamal Adams has been a bit hot topic as well. At the moment, there's the Geno Smith debate. I suspect that 99% of fans are kind of just sort of sat there shrugging the shoulders at it and going, well, whatever happens, happens. But then there's a very noisy 1% who want to try and make out like there are people who absolutely hate Geno or don't understand football because they perhaps don't view him as an elite player or something. And then there are a few people who perhaps are a bit overboard with their negativity, but I think it's extremely over-exaggerated within, you know, I've seen various people, you know, Corbin Smith's been doing this a lot, sort of trying to imply that there's a lot of people who hate Geno or don't want him on the team. And I think, Robbie, for me, I think most Seahawks fans just kind of go, whatever. Like he's a 34-year-old, well, he's going to be 34 this year. He's led the Seahawks for 2 years. He was a journeyman before that. They were 9-8 both seasons. He did some things well, some things not so well. Meh. Like that's kind of where I think most fans are. But is that the big topic, Robbie, or am I missing something? What's next?
I think that's going to be the biggest topic. Yeah. I mean, you know, what is the March 18th is kind of like the trade deadline for him. So I think that's probably going to be, you know, the talking point until that date comes, if it comes sooner. You know, the Geno hate thing is it's interesting that, I mean, I've seen a lot of things that, you know, the people are saying as well. And I think, you know, ultimately it comes down to like each side has a stat to throw at the other side, you know, like, well, he's led the most, you know, comebacks or, you know, he's, you know, got this or that, but like they don't take in consideration, like how many dropped interceptions does he have and all these other things. And again, I'm not a Geno hater either. I think they're, you know, we just definitely need that quarterback in the future. And listen, if you want to keep him this year and draft a quarterback and have him be the bridge this year, I'm okay with that. But I mean, I think there's a reason why they're talking about Drew Lock still. And I think there's a reason why this is a topic of conversation. It's not because he came out and has blown up the league and been super amazing. He hasn't been. He's been fine, but we don't want fine. We want great at the quarterback position.
Yeah, that's you know, that is an interesting point. I think that the thing that's been noticeable on this, Adam, is the way that it's been handled by the people who are going to ultimately decide what happens with Geno Smith, and also the way that Adam Schefter reported it. So to have John Schneider, and I've been talking a lot about this over the last couple of weeks, well, more than that, because it's been a while now since John did his solo press conference. I think his summary of Geno Smith was spot on, and I don't really think it warrants much more. It was essentially he started very well in 2022 and then didn't have a great end to the season and didn't have a great start to last season and then finished well. And that's kind of where he left it. And I think that's all that needed to be said. And then you have sort of Mike McDonald was asked about Geno Smith, and he volunteered the name of Drew Lock and kind of ended his answer with, "We'll see how this situation plays out," which felt quite ominous for Geno Smith and quite non-committal. Ryan Grubb spoke in a more complimentary way of Geno Smith, I would suggest, than the GM and the head coach, but then also volunteered the name of Drew Lock and mentioned that he'd been giving him new father advice this week, which, given that he's not even contracted for next year, it feels especially telling. And then Schefter comes along and tweets that Geno Smith's going to be, he's not going to be cut last Thursday, and could have just left the report there at that. But he then quote tweets himself to add, "This is good value for either Seattle or, any team that might want to trade for him." I mean, that people need to understand how the game works. That sometimes when these things get put out there, there's a reason. This is how the sausage is made. You absolutely have to read between the lines on that. And then the other thing I would suggest, Adam, is that Schneider was on 710 Seattle Sports that day after the Schefter report had come out. He wasn't asked one question about Geno Smith. He wasn't asked once. I cannot believe for a second that they just, forgot to ask about Geno Smith. I think they were perhaps advised, don't ask about Geno Smith. There's plenty of other things you can talk about here. And as the flagship station, perhaps obliged. That would be my guess as to what has happened there. But I thought that was clear. If Geno Smith was the guy, as many people are suggesting in Seattle for this year, it would have been easy to go, "Hey, it's good news about Geno, isn't it?" "Yeah, it is, and he's the guy, and we're looking forward to seeing him next year." No questions about Geno Smith, Adam.
Yeah, I've actually found, particularly in the last few weeks, the whole Geno debate to be quite uncomfortable, and at times I've almost felt like I've been sneered at for having an opinion that I just think Geno is fine. You've got a group of people that look into advanced analytics, which I don't think I'm a huge fan of. The more I watch the NFL, the more I find it sort of jars with what I feel like I'm actually watching. But it's not so that stats don't have a value, but I do feel like that at times you think, well, let's just not even play the games. We'll just have a look at who's got the best DVOA and we'll just give them the win based on that. And, the game doesn't matter. And we can call Dak Prescott an amazing quarterback, even though he's never won a big game in his entire life, because his DVOA is good. So that must be more important. And I kind of feel like there's loads of these hidden stats. And if you pull up a spreadsheet and first down efficiency, Geno looks great. But all the stats that people actually look at and the games you actually watch, Geno looks fine. Exactly what he is, fine. And it strikes me that if you say that Geno's fine, you then get, as you said, someone like Corbin saying, "Can you believe these fans hate Geno Smith to this point?" I don't think anyone ever said that. I think there are more people moaning about people saying Geno is terrible than people who are actually saying Geno is terrible, unless you've sort of got, I don't know, Confederate flag 183764938 as your Twitter profile saying that Geno sucks. Those are the only people that I can see that are actually saying something like that. And I don't know, I just feel there's been like this real sneering, like, you don't know ball kind of idea that if you don't think Geno is the next Joe Montana, and I don't know how we've got here, but I've just felt like it's been a really disrespectful conversation to 95% of fans who appear to be watching stuff. And we know what Geno is. We watch it every week. Like, I don't need to know his second down efficiency between 8 to 12 yards, throwing with his left hand when it's 38%, humidity and a wind chill of -16 Fahrenheit. No one cares. It doesn't actually matter. We're watching what is happening. And I don't know. I don't know how you can come to a view that isn't between, he's like, an 8 to 10 win a year quarterback and an early playoff exit. And that's not that's great for him to have made a career from where he was. But I don't see why it needs to be any more than that. And I certainly don't see why fans need to be criticized or condescended for offering that view. And I've found it, sorry, I know it's quite a long diatribe there, but I really had to get it off my chest because it's been bugging me a lot in the last couple of weeks.
I don't apologize at all, Adam. I think nothing else has to be said, really. I think you've said it all. It's perfectly summed up there. I find it interesting because really Schneider's review is just it is the review. That is what Geno Smith has shown over his 2 seasons. I think there has been at times a little bit of a tendency to absolve Geno Smith of any of the issues. Like Hugh Millen did a very good job on KJR, I thought, of just breaking down. I mean, there was a long list of things where the Seahawks were ranked average or below, and some of them are quite obvious because we saw it: red zone offense and third downs at times and stuff like that. There was a whole list. I can't remember them off the top of my head. Go and check it out. He was on with Softy. It was in the first hour that he discussed those statistics on Friday's show. And, you know, that's not all on Geno Smith. Shane Waldron deserves a lot of blame. The offensive line deserves a lot of blame. At times, the receivers and the tight ends will have deserved some blame. But Geno Smith will also deserve some responsibility of that. And then when he played well at the end of the season, it's, you know, the Dallas game is just sort of seen as a great performance. But it was also a game where the Seahawks did nothing in the fourth quarter. When if they had 2 fourth down plays, and they, you know, I get the second one it wasn't a good play call, and I get stuff like this, but you know, it does feel at times like people have picked sides and then will look for the ways to sort of fight their argument. And the truth is exactly what you've said, Adam, that this is a player who is a decent NFL quarterback. But the Seahawks are in a start of something new. They have bad cap problems. You know, what is the plan for John Schneider? It isn't necessarily just to run it back for next year, hope to be a little bit better with new coaches and go from there. It might be greater change. It might be a lot of changes on the defense. It might be a new, younger quarterback. And these are just things, Robbie, that rather than dismiss them, as some people have done, insisting that Geno Smith is the man, that's it. How dare you suggest anything else? I think that's pouring cold water on the blossoming fire that is a very interesting offseason for the Seahawks. That actually, there are all sorts of different things that could happen. It could be Geno Smith and Drew Lock back next year. It could be Drew Lock and a rookie. It could be Geno, Drew, and a rookie. Who knows? Like, there are all sorts of things. Then you could go take it to the defense. You could take it to the offensive line. You know, there's players on the team who might not be here next year. There are so many different interesting things to discuss. Why are we dismissing anything, especially, Robbie, when the evidence is there that we have to take it seriously? Schefter did not put that tweet out for a laugh. He put that tweet out because the Seahawks, in my opinion, the Seahawks are open to trading him and want to see what's out there. And that was made very clear with that tweet. So let's just take that seriously. It doesn't mean he'll get traded, but it's a topic that warrants more than just being dismissed. And thankfully, I have to say, everybody I've heard speak about this on KJR has completely embraced that, by the way. They have just gone, yep, acknowledge the Schefter tweet and take it seriously and talking about it. And I hope that continues, Robbie, because if there's one thing I'm a bit bored of with this, following this team, is the fingers in the ears. No, Russell Wilson isn't being traded. What are you talking about? There's no chance. Well, no, Jamal Adams should get a massive contract. What do you mean? He's an elite player. He's going to the Hall of Fame. No, Pete Carroll's not going anywhere. He's going to be here as long as he wants. You know, all of those topics where people just put the fingers in their ears and said, no, all came true, Robbie. Let's not do that again.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because that's literally what I was going to say. It's all the same people that I feel like we're just saying, no, Pete's not going anywhere. Russ won't ever get traded. You know, this is all shenanigans. None of it makes any sense, blah, 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 blah. And it's all, you know, I mean, you can't write anything off, I think, at this point, especially with a new coaching staff. You don't know. You're right. John Snyder, he seemed very lukewarm on his take of Geno. You know, it definitely sounds like he is a fan of Drew Lock and might want to see what he wants, what he has in him. You know, again, not saying Geno's going to get traded. He could be here next year, but I think it's not out of the realm of possibility that he's going to be gone, which I actually I think it's more likely that he is going to be gone. I think they're going to find a trade package that they're going to want to do. And it might, my thing is, I think it might be something that people were like, oh, they didn't get enough for Geno, right? They should have gotten more. And really, maybe they get a fifth, you know, and they take that, get the salary off their books and move on.
That's a distinct possibility, and I think that could be a debate that ends up happening down the line. You've got a big picture to work out here, and I was listening to Mike Florio talking about Kirk Cousins' future, and he is somebody who is somewhat connected to the Vikings and understands what's going on there. And he was warning the Vikings that they've got to be careful, that when the combine comes around, there's a very distinct possibility that Kirk Cousins will get an attractive offer from either the Falcons or the Steelers, and that his wife and her family are all from Georgia, and that Kirk Cousins could wind up with the Falcons. So if that happens, Atlanta has a quarterback. Then Minnesota needs somebody else. I happen to think that that is probably the flaw for JJ McCarthy. Jeff noted to me the other day that the Vikings are a very analytically driven team, that they have an analytics person in their front office who has a lot of draft influence. And McCarthy's analytics are good. You can imagine him in that McVay system. I think he could go to 11. But if that happens, and let's say Drake May and Caleb Williams and Jane Daniels go top 3, and one of them will go at 6 at the latest to the Giants, that doesn't leave anybody for, say, the Steelers. That doesn't leave anybody for the Broncos. These teams then have to sort of decide what they're going to do. And I think the Steelers are the team that would be ideal for Geno, he would be ideal for them. I think it's a good match. And they could have Kenny Pickett as their backup on a rookie contract still. I think it makes an awful lot of sense. But I don't think you're going to get a lot back for Geno Smith, who generated very little interest as a free agent a year ago. The only other team that was linked with him was Tampa Bay. And even then, it wasn't that serious. It did feel a little bit like the Seahawks were on an island in terms of getting Geno Smith back. And the contract that he received from the Seahawks was not of the 40 million variety that a lot of people in the media were predicting. So I don't think there's going to be a major market for him. It could be a 5th, maybe a 4th. They could take some of the bonus money to get a better pick if that's what they want to do. But Adam, it does feel as if this could go either way. And it feels, as Robbie and I were discussing there, it feels pointless, frankly, to dismiss anything at this point.
Absolutely. And if anything, if you're going to take anyone's word for what they think about Geno Smith, the team at no point have suggested or acted like they think that Geno is absolutely the guy. They offered him a very team favorable contract last season with incentives that, they thought, well, if you can match what you did last season, you can have an extra $10 million, split 5 by 2. He didn't do any of them because the team didn't fancy him to do it. When he was healthy against the Eagles on Monday Night Football, they didn't race him back in like they did Russell Wilson against the Packers, was it, a few years ago after he hurt his finger, and they got him back in literally as quickly as they could. And now, you have to, Adam Schefter doesn't tweet stuff out just vacuously for the sake of it. He gets information from a source and he puts it out. And I listened to the same show as you, Rob, with Hugh Millen, and he's right. It's either come from the agent, which it obviously wouldn't have done, or it's come from the team. And the team are saying Geno is available for trade at the right price. So there's nothing even that the team have done in Geno Smith's career with the Seahawks to suggest that they think he is absolutely the guy. So I don't know why people can't just, they take everything else the Seahawks say at face value and at their word 100%. And if they say we're challenging for a championship, they start, like getting the parade ticker tape out in August because that's what they say. So the team are telling you what they think about this guy. And again, I'm not trying to denigrate Geno Smith. He's done a good job. He's been paid like a good quarterback. But equally, if they want to get a guy for the future, there's no point having, they're obviously not going to have Geno, Andrew, and a quarterback that they draft early. And the fact they've mentioned Drew Lock 3 or 4 times when he's not even under contract. I don't know how many tea leaves you need to read before you can get a pretty clear picture on what they think. And they may well end up with Geno Smith as the quarterback next year. I'm not ruling that out, but it doesn't strike me that there'd be much that they would do to stand in his way if they got an offer they thought was acceptable.
We've got a couple of super chats, going to come to them in a second. Robbie, I'm going to tell you what I think as of today, and this is my prediction on the 18th of February, Sunday, the 18th of February. I reserve the right to change this opinion. I think you're allowed to do that in the world. Once you say, I think too often you say something and people hold it to you forever. This is my opinion today based on the information we have. Here's what I think is going to happen. I think after the combine, we're going to find out that Geno Smith has been traded, possibly to Pittsburgh. I think the Seahawks will re-sign Drew Lock. I think they will sign a veteran quarterback on a cheap deal, possibly Tyler Huntley because he's got a connection to the Ravens, possibly someone like Sam Darnold or Joshua Dobbs or something. It's just somebody who can come in under the guise of this person is coming in to compete with Drew Lock. And then I think they will go into the draft. I think they will trade down from the 16th pick unless they think the guy is there, the guy that we have to have, that this is going to be our leader forever. I think they will trade down from 16. And I think at some point between picks 25 and 60, Robbie, I think they will draft a quarterback. That's my opinion. It could be their first pick. It could be their second pick. I think that's their plan. I think they are already laying the foundations for this. I think that the rookie could easily start and that it wouldn't be Drew Lock. There will be no bridge. I'll tell you something very interesting. I stumbled across this by accident today. It was something on, I think, called 1080 The Fan. And because I watch a lot of Seahawks stuff on YouTube, it just chucked it out there for me on the algorithm because I watch a lot of Seahawks stuff. And it was Brady Henderson, who was excellent and is extremely well connected, by the way, and is on top of the Geno Smith stuff completely. And he said it was very interesting that the Seahawks, in his opinion, rated Anthony Richardson enough to take him at number 5 last year, but were never likely to do it because they had already paid Geno Smith and they felt like having Smith's salary plus Anthony Richardson's top 5 pick bonus money on the books to not play would have been an issue. And he thinks it's the same this year, that he thinks it would be very unlikely for them to keep Geno Smith and draft a rookie to sit for a year. So I feel less confident that that would ever be a plan for the Seahawks. And I also think if they draft someone in the first 2 rounds, it will possibly be with the intention of starting them. And the name that I keep coming back to, and I make no apologies for this, it is obvious, in my opinion, why we would keep coming back to this name, is Michael Penix Jr. Simply because they have looked at the last 2 years of Washington's offense, which has been led by Michael Penix Jr. and Ryan Grubb, hand in hand, not literally. Or maybe they do, I don't know. But they've worked together on this offense to get the Washington Huskies to the national championship. They have seen the success they've had, and they've thought, we want this man to run our offense in the NFL. And when you look at Penix, it's weird how he was overrated for a bit, in my opinion, and then I wrote why. And then he was especially overrated after the Texas game because people like John Middlecoff, who's awesome, but he was suddenly saying he was going to be the second overall pick in the draft. That was never going to happen. And I had to write a 3,500-word article in response. It just flopped out onto the page. But then he's actually got underrated now. Like a few weeks on, everyone's forgotten. Everyone's like moved on from that. Like people are, he's a 3rd-round pick. And he's no good. And the injuries and the age and the left hand, no good. I'm telling you now, you can pull out 15 to 20 throws from last season alone and go, these are as good a throws as you will ever see in college football. Go and do what I did, right? And go and watch the highlights of Patrick. I'm not saying that Mahomes is the same. I'm not making the comparison. But you watch Mahomes at Texas Tech and he's making some really cool plays, right? And you think, I can see why he ended up being the guy that he became. And go and watch the Senior Bowl with Josh Allen or his pro day. I can see why he became the player that he became. Now go and watch some of the throws that Michael Penix Jr. threw for Washington. They are absolutely stunning throws. He is not flawless. He cannot scramble around and extend plays like the Herberts and the Mahomeses and the Allens. That's not his game. It never will be his game. But if you wanted to have a pocket-centric offense with explosive plays, with a player who can throw a football 40, 50, 60 yards downfield. It's not even straight downfield 50 yards, guys. It's like I can throw it 30 yards to the sideline and drop it into the perfect place for an on-rushing Rome Odunze or Jalen McMillan or Jalen Polk. It hits them in stride in between two defenders. Do you know there's probably two quarterbacks who could even think about trying that in the NFL. Most don't even think I can throw that throw, and Penix can do it. And because of that, I think you have to take him seriously for the Seahawks, not just because of the offense, but because he has that ability in his arm. And I think John Schneider will look at that and think he's mature, he's well-liked, he will come in, and if you start him as a rookie, guys, he will know all of the terminology because he's just spent the last 2 years with Ryan Grubb, and he was with DeBoer in Indiana. So the terminology is there. It's in his mind. That's no adjustment. He can help those receivers and the linemen learn it because he's been in it for his whole college career. And that he can come in and that he can provide major impacts on a rookie contract. As he goes through the growing pains, he will provide explosive plays. And that he can adjust better than any rookie quarterback usually can because his offensive coordinator is in Seattle right now. And I know for a fact, because I've spoken to people at Washington, that he and Grubb communicate brilliantly together. So that's my prediction, Robbie, is that they will trade Geno. They will bring Drew Lock in. They will bring in a veteran, cheap veteran, with Drew Lock in free agency. And that at some point in this draft, I don't know when it'll be, but they will draft Michael Penix Jr. and he will start for the Seahawks in 2024. That's my prediction. What do you think, Robbie?
I mean, you make a lot of solid points for why it could be that case, and I'm not disagreeing with you by any means. Michael Penix Jr. is one of the most polarizing prospects in the NFL right now, or in the draft, just because he has so many good qualities, and then there are some that are just like, like you put out a couple days ago, or maybe it was even today, you put out some statistics about him being on the move, and it was like 28% or 30%. On the move passing. I don't think you can be an NFL quarterback and have that kind of stats, and that's pretty bad. And I just feel like you need a mobile quarterback in today's modern football. And he had one of the best offensive lines in Washington. He ain't gonna have that in Seattle. I'm not saying he's gonna have a bad offensive line, and hopefully they build the trenches up, in this draft. But there's still a lot of question marks on that offensive line. I'm fascinated by him. I think he's very intriguing because, like you said, he's got a hell of an arm. That guy can put it anywhere, and he can put it on a dime. I don't know. But here's the thing: he's also more athletic than people give him credit for, too. Like, I've seen him run. He's not like he's unathletic. He's athletic. He just on the run throwing. That's those kind of things that I don't know if that thing can be taught. I don't know. It's interesting.
It's a weird one because one of the best throws from college football last season was him on the run, of course, against USC, throwing it down the left sideline to the tight end for a touchdown. It's an amazing throw. So he's kind of got it in him. I don't know why those. I mean, as you quite rightly mentioned there, Robbie, the statistics are really bad. I'm trying to find them from the article earlier. You're quite right that I brought them up. That he 23.3% completion percentage when scrambling, which is pretty poor. But then there are plenty of other statistics that work in his favor. So his arm strength's good. He's the best at play action in college football. He graded first on play action through PFF. His accuracy on 3rd and 4th down was, I think, better than everybody other than JJ McCarthy. And he led college football in big time throws, and he led college football in big time throws on play action. So there are a lot of things that work in his favor. He is a fantastic athlete. Like I said, I've been there. I've been in the Washington facility. I've seen the numbers. I've seen that he can jump a 38-inch vertical. It smacked me right between the eyes when I saw those numbers on their board in their training room. 38-inch vertical is unbelievable, and he does not have a thick lower body. So that shows he's not like tree trunk legs jumping. He's not Nick Chubb. But the fact he can do a 38-inch vertical is special. And he ran very, very quick, something like 20 odd miles an hour at the Senior Bowl or something he was timed at. So he's a great athlete. He hasn't been able to scramble. But, is that the offense or what? And the thing is that Adam, I want your opinion on the prediction that I've just posited there. But the other thing that I would say is that I spoke to somebody who is as good as it gets when it comes to evaluation. In the league, top notch. Experienced, the best of one of the best in the business, and he voiced serious concerns about the offense that Penix played in. That it was all predetermined reads, stuff like that, and it made me second guess where he would go and how much potential he has. The Seahawks just hired Ryan Grubb to be their offensive coordinator. If they were worried about the offense, they wouldn't have hired Ryan Grubb to be the offensive coordinator. So it makes me think, yeah, teams may well have that serious concern. I'm inclined to think the Seahawks don't, because they've hired Ryan Grubb. So we'll see. Adam, what do you think of the plan? Any sense in what I suggested?
Yeah, I think it all makes an awful lot of sense. And I would say for anyone that's scoffing at the idea or putting it down as laughable, well, Rob hasn't had too many laughable ideas that haven't come to pass in the last few years, is all I would say. So when Rob makes a prediction or stuff gets talked about, more often than not, we seem to be pretty much on the pulse. So I would suggest that, it sounds certainly very plausible to me. And you made exactly the point I was about to make on Penix. They just hired the guy who showed off an unbelievable offense with his offensive line coach, with the quarterback. I mean, it's literally the triumvirate of people that would be involved in putting all this together. And in addition to that, Mike Macdonald said very clearly when he was asked what his offensive identity is going to be before Grubb was hired, he said, well, I don't know, because I don't know who's going to be there, who's going to be running it, who's going to be hiring it. Well, given that he's got Grubb in to do it, and it sounds like he's going to have the keys to basically run what he wants to do, you don't need to put too many pieces together to suggest that Penix will obviously be at least a high target for the guy that's running it, because his best ever work was done in conjunction with Michael Penix. It seems almost too obvious to even be worth a discussion point at this stage.
I've seen one or two people in the chat. I'll ignore some of the sort of lazy, this is laughable suggestions, and people saying, "Can you build it around a pocket passer?" I mean, it's amazing, really, that's even a question. The game has changed to an extent that there are a lot more mobile quarterbacks these days, and that is obviously a big feature of the modern NFL. But didn't we have for years the talk about, can Russell Wilson throw from the pocket, and the preference that he would do that more, or that's what the Seahawks needed, was just somebody who could throw from the pocket? Can you build an offense around that? Yes, you can. Because if you can get a running game going, and they keep speaking about how important the running game is, if you get that running game going in Seattle, the safeties come up, there's your opportunity to hit teams deep. That's the kind of offense I think John wants. That's kind of Andy Reid special, isn't it? Run the ball, get the safeties cheating up, throw it around the yard. Explosive plays. I think that's what they want to do. Play action pass, throw it downfield, set up the running game. I think that's how the Seahawks are going to design this thing. So I think, I genuinely think there are a handful of quarterbacks in this draft who can come in and do that. And I think Penix is best placed to do it for Seattle based on everything that we've already talked about. So we'll see. Not guaranteeing it. I'm not saying I'm definitely going to be right. I'll tell you what, Robbie, though. I'll tell you what I think I'm going to be right about. I don't think the Seahawks are just think a little, one offensive line pick here and a re-signing of Leonard Williams there, and that they're just going to roll into next season. I think bigger changes, Robbie, are on the cards. This is a completely fresh start for this team. They need to identify who's going to be part of this roster when the Seahawks lift a Lombardi trophy in the next 5 years. That's the key. It is not, how do we get to 10 wins in 2024? It's about identifying who is going to be here long term. And I'll tell you who isn't going to be here long term. Jamal Adams, Quandre Diggs, Geno Smith. I'm sorry, that's just the reality of it. People who might be, DK, Jackson Smith and Jigba, hopefully Charles Cross, possibly Leonard Williams, because I think he's good enough. And if he's interested in playing for another 3-4 years, I think you can get 3-4 good years out of him, Robbie. Boya Mafe, Devin Witherspoon. These are your guys. And I think really it's about working everything else out now to get to the top, because that's what the target has to be. The aim has to be in that game that we haven't even talked. We have to spend 5 minutes talking about that, by the way, last week. We have to be in the game that the Niners have just been in. It's not about winning as many games as possible next year and squeezing into the playoffs as a 6th or 7th seed. It's about setting the platform now for Mike McDonald to do what Pete Carroll did and lift that blooming trophy. And the plans start now.
You know, Mike McDonald came in and one of the first things I heard out of his mouth was, we're going to win a lot of football games. And I just believed it. I just believed what he was saying. Like, I believe he has the right mentality to come in and put this thing together with John Snyder. And you're right, there's a lot of players that aren't going to be a part of this team next year that are. And you remember when Pete and John first came in, they made a crazy amount of moves. A lot of moves that people weren't fans of, right? The Hasselback thing, you know, and bringing in Tavares Jackson. Like, no one was huge fans of that. There's things that people aren't going to like, but they're going to be moves that are going to try to hopefully set us up for the future to, you're right, to host a Lombardi. That's all we want. That's what we need. And that's should be the ultimate goal for every team. And you look at how this roster is going to be built, and I'm excited to see what they do.
Let's get some super chats before we move on. Cisco says, I've been really impressed with how well Pete has consulted on all of these hires. John is lucky to have such an experienced presence to guide all his hires. Yes, that's a joke. Do you know the unbelievable thing? Thank you, Cisco, for that very generous super chat, by the way. Thank you for that. The funny thing is that someone on ESPN, the host, they were talking about Geno Smith's contract with Mina Kimes and Tim Hasselbeck. And the host referenced that Pete was still there and was influencing things, and how and I thought, wow, you know, someone in the back room really needs to just tap her on the shoulder and go, he's not really doing anything, you know, he's not there anymore. He's been fired. It's just a way to pay him over a year as opposed to giving him one big lump sum. Matt says, I feel like John has not prioritized the drafting and developing of the interior O-line in years past. Any chance that changes in this new era? Adam, what do you think? Thank you, Matt. I don't know whether that is going to change. I think it might be that John Schneider thinks you can get a guard, you can get a center. The one thing I would say, though, people like to talk about how good the Niners are in the trenches. And clearly they have an amazing left tackle. The other 4/5 of their offensive line is effing garbage. You know, they are awful on the offensive line, and they produce a fantastic, explosive offense that dominates up front. So I don't think the path to the Seahawks winning is necessarily spending like a first-round pick on a guard or $20 million on a veteran to go with it. I think they just have to put together a line, and Scott Huff is going to have to put a line together that can function, that can play sound schematic football and execute most weeks and do what they need to get done. That could include high picks, but I don't think it necessarily needs to, Adam.
Yeah, I mean, I think the utopian idea of everyone being like Detroit's offensive line, or the Dallas offensive line that DeMarco Murray was running behind for a while. I think that's probably just, you're not going to get that. You know, that's sort of as lightning in a bottle as sort of the LOB was on the back end of the defense, to be honest. It's just not likely to do it. And one thing I love doing is watching Jeff Schwartz's breakdowns of what offensive lines do after the game, when he's got his spoon as his pointer and he's breaking down who does what and whose role everything is. And when you watch that, it does really feel like the scheme and what they're coached to do and are they aware of their assignments is so equally on a level with the personnel. You know, they're all massive guys and they're not literally sort of revolving doors like we tend to think some of them are. I think from a coaching standpoint, that can often be the reason why someone looks good. Now, I am far from an offensive line expert, and to be honest, I'm far from an expert on what the Seahawks have been doing in the draft. I think none of us are, because we don't know if it has been John Schneider or it has been Pete Carroll prioritizing. And I think that is really the super chat is a really good introduction into that topic of are we now going to see a completely different drafting strategy because we will latterly realize that Pete was doing everything and now John gets a chance? So I think that there's an interesting sort of subsection to the question that's been asked. But I think having the coach is going to be the primary factor in coherent offensive line play. And then I suppose we'll see what happens when it comes to drafting. You know, they've got 2 tackles. They've got a center in Brown, who I know that is pretty highly rated by the team. And so, you know, let's see how it goes. You know, I kind of feel if you can get 3 or 5 together in the modern NFL, that's not a bad number based on where a lot of other teams sit with their front 5.
And the other thing to remember is, with Detroit, their 2 guards are a free agent who was earning less than Phil Haynes this year or last year, and the other one was a 3rd-round pick. So it's not that you necessarily, they didn't have 5 first-round picks. It wasn't like Dallas when, like you're right, you mentioned there, Adam, they had like number 9 overall pick, they had like the number 16 overall pick, and then they had like the number 30 overall pick on their line, and then filled the other 2 spots. And then, it's not absolutely necessary. What I would say, Robbie, is I hope that the Seahawks, when they come to their free agency meetings, will put a list together where there are some offensive linemen near the top of it who they want to reach out to agents to the combine, see if they can get something done. I'm really hoping they are just going to move on from the safeties and get cheaper and younger and faster and more physical there, and that they will push some of that money into the trenches. But I also don't think it'll be the be-all and the end-all if they go up to some of these offensive linemen, they go elsewhere, and you pivot and get a slightly cheaper, maybe experienced guard to come in or whatever, or you get some guys that fit the scheme that Scott Huff wants to run. I don't think that would be the end of the world. I don't think the Seahawks need to do whatever it takes to spend their 1st-round pick on an offensive lineman. I think some of the offensive linemen that are in the interior are a little bit overrated. I think Jackson Powers-Johnson, I went back and reviewed him this week. I think I mentioned this in another video or an article. And I didn't like the way that he shot his hands. I didn't like the way that he dealt with his angles. In fairness, Cedric Van Pran was a blog favorite last year. I went back and watched him today, and I thought he had a similar issue at times for Georgia this year. So I'm not sure that just sort of go and get our center or our guard with our high pick is necessarily what the Seahawks need to do. But then, Robbie, I'd be very interested in bringing Zach Zinter in from Michigan. I think he's a terrific interior offensive lineman and could be great for a long time. So I think it's about getting the right guy, but you don't necessarily have to. It's about where you get them, and it's not about having to spend a 1st-round pick or $15 million on somebody this offseason to build this line. What do you think?
No, I agree. I mean, and you laid it out perfectly in one of your articles about the meat of the draft being between the 2nd and 4th rounds. And I think there's plenty of talent there that you can go out and get interior lineman, a center if you want, to someone to come in and compete at that position, right, left guard. And you can spend a little money in free agency. You're right. If you drop the safeties and go younger there, I don't think there's any reason why you absolutely have to spend your 1st-round pick on an offensive line. You still have to focus on the D line as well. So it's both sides of the ball. So it's not just that one side.
We will talk a little bit about defensive line in a moment. This one from Nausea. One Nausea. Thank you for the super chat. Excited to catch this live. How can I support if I don't watch it live? Well, you can do a super, I think it's called a super like if you want to support the channel after the event. Which is an option, and there's always Patreon. Or do you know what? If you just want to watch, give us a like, then that would be much appreciated too. This one says, for linebackers, if we can't keep Brooks, then what? What does this draft look like for linebackers? Well, I'll tell you what. I'll give you a draft thought on the linebackers in a second. But guys, Adam first. Do you think they should keep Jordan Brooks or not? And do you think they will keep Jordan Brooks or not?
Brooks is another one where the sort of analytics guys that seem to dive in make him sound like he's sort of the next Brian Urlacher. And then when you watch him, it doesn't necessarily seem that way. But I don't feel like I feel like quarterback, you can kind of see what you're watching a bit more than linebackers when you don't know the scheme. From a continuity standpoint, I think I probably would keep Jordan Brooks if the price was right. But if he was going to be looking at the, mad eight-figure plus annual salary, then I don't necessarily think that would represent the best value for money. But it's not a subject I've delved too much into because there's so many more kind of headliners to talk about than Jordan Brooks, and maybe that in itself is an indication that I don't see him as sort of that sort of player. But I don't know. I mean, I'll probably bounce that back to you, Rob, and see what you think about that one, or Robbie.
Robbie, go for it.
I wouldn't re-sign Jordan Brooks, and just because as Adam was saying, the money that he's going to probably collect is, in my opinion, will be too much. And I hope we don't overpay for him if we do keep him, because I just don't think there's any reason to bring him back. And he's not a bad player. He's just not. I don't think he, for the money that he's going to get, I don't think he's going to be worth the contract to keep him. I think. I would rather go younger at the linebacker position as well, and try to get somebody in on a rookie contract, or I saw someone mention Queen earlier, and I don't think we'll go that route either. But I hope they do something else. I just don't think re-signing Brooks is the best idea, especially what I think he's probably going to make. I mean, I guess it depends on what the contract is, but yeah.
Yeah, I think Queen's going to be too expensive. I am open to keeping Jordan Brooks, depending on price. I actually think the best thing for him and the best thing for the Seahawks is probably to do a short-term deal for a year or maybe two, and you sell it to him on the idea that, look, Mike McDonald's just turned around Patrick Queen's career. He was drafted, like 2 picks after you, and he was going absolutely nowhere. He was a bust, and now he's going to earn however much in free agency. So come back here and let him do the same with you. And then he replaces Bobby Wagner as your middle linebacker. And then you can draft somebody to play next to him. And then you just sort of push things on a year and see how he does with Mike McDonald. I think that would be a good plan. But I don't want to spend a lot of money on Jordan Brooks. I just don't think there's going to be a huge market for him. I don't think there's going to be a huge market for a number of these linebackers either. So we'll go from there. And there are alternatives too. Like, I went on PFF's free agency tracker and was really surprised to see that Devin White's projected to get a $7 million contract for 1 year, the Tampa Bay linebacker. And you're kind of thinking, okay, maybe things have gone a bit south for him in Tampa Bay. Am I prepared to take a chance on Devin White in Seattle as the linebacker of the future? Yes, that feels like why wouldn't you? And there's other players like that. Kenneth Murray's a free agent from the Chargers as well. He was drafted in the same year as Brooks and Queen. So there are some options there. I'd play it by ear. In terms of the draft, you are not going to get a linebacker in the early rounds, I don't think. I'm a big fan of the way that Peyton Wilson plays at NC State, but I think that the injury history, people talk about Penix's injury history. Peyton Wilson's even worse. But he also kind of dawned on me at the Senior Bowl. He doesn't have the prototypical body for a linebacker. I think Jeremiah Trotz is a playmaker, but I worry about his speed and his quickness. That's going to be big for him if he tests at the combine. Edrin Cooper is quick and probably is ideally suited for that Patrick Queen type role. I kind of have him as a day 2 pick, so I think he's aggressive. I really like Nathaniel Watson. He's a sack specialist as well as someone who called the plays on the defense. I think Nathaniel Watson's underrated. Cedric Gray, very interesting. Junior Colson, Mike McDonald will know all about him from Michigan. And then there's a whole bunch of guys that you could get on day 3. So I think that it's an interesting group, but certainly for the middle rounds, which will suit the Seahawks because I don't think they're going to take the position early. So I think you get Brooks and you draft somebody else as well. Okay, and I don't think Bobby Wagner's coming back. Big Mike says, each of your opinions on if Penix will be available at 16 or after a trade down, and if so far, how far down? I think he's going to be a second-round pick, guys. Have you got a thought, Adam, on where he might go?
I always love how guys move around on the draft board, like without actually throwing a pass in a game, but you have your combines and your pro days and guys move all over the place. I love the idea that they raised on KJR that it would be so interesting to see what Penix's draft stock would be if Texas scored a touchdown with the last play of the game in the semifinal. And the last game we saw of Penix was that semifinal and not sort of the less impressive final. I mean, it wouldn't stun me if he was discussed as a top 10 pick. if that was right now, if that was the last thing that we saw. But given, the national championship game didn't go quite as well, he's obviously dropped down a bit. I happen to think if the draft was tomorrow, I'd be more nervous about Penix being gone by 16 than I will be when it comes around, because I do think Water will find its level, and he'll probably end up being a sort of back end of the first, early second round pick. But I think if the draft was going to be tomorrow, I would wonder if we had to move up a couple of spots, maybe just to make sure we got him, if he was the guy they wanted to go after.
I'd say one thing that Robbie, before I let you answer the same question, is I thought the Senior Bowl was really interesting for these guys. I don't think any of the quarterbacks did themselves a favor. They did not throw it. They didn't throw it, okay? So when they were doing the scrimmages, what you've seen in the past is you've been able to watch like Mac Jones, for example. You could watch Mac Jones at the Senior Bowl, and I know his career is not sizzled in New England, but you could watch him throw several passes with anticipation and timing in sort of the team drills and the scrimmages and stuff like that. And you got a good picture of how he was performing. When I watched Penix, Nix, Pratt, Rattler, none of them wanted to throw it like downfield. Like they were all have a look. Oh no, check it down. Check it down. It was like every flipping pass was check down, or they'd set off and run. It was like, guys, can you just try and throw it deep? Can you just try and show that arm off? Can you just try and do something? It was so underwhelming and frustrating to watch. And I don't think any of them elevated themselves that much at the Senior Bowl. And I think that was a major missed opportunity for someone like Michael Penix Jr. given his arm, and for Bo Nix, who's got a good arm as well. So I think that will hurt them a little bit. I think teams may well come out of the Mobile a little bit underwhelmed from that. Robbie, what do you think in terms of where Penix will go?
I'm going to give like the worst answer for this, but just because he's I think he's such a polarizing player, I can see him, falling in the top 10, and I can see him dropping to the third round. I just have no idea at this point right now. I think the combine, I don't even know if the combine's going to help, because was it 2 years ago we were Malik Willis is going to be a number one pick overall, and he dropped him to the third. I have no idea. I have no idea what's happening, and I think he has the arm talent to be one of the best, and then there are things that could drop him down. So I have a hard time between a first and a third. That's the best answer I'm going to give.
No, I think it's a fair answer, Robbie. I think it's probably is the best answer, frankly, because I think that's where it is, and I think it's that way for probably like four of the guys in the draft, that they their range where they could go. It's really unpredictable. I think it was very obvious 2 years ago that they're all kind of mid-round picks, and I think last year it was kind of obvious that Anthony Richardson would go very early, and this year I think it's very difficult to project where these guys are going to go, aside from Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels. So we shall see. So before we talk, Robbie, Adam says he's okay for a bit longer. Are you okay just for a bit longer? Because we've still got a few things we want to discuss. Yeah. I wanted to talk about defensive linemen and stuff like that, and some of the players on the team who may not be with the team. But we've gone a whole hour without mentioning the Super Bowl. So, Adam, how much did you enjoy watching that last weekend, the Niners suffering a crushing defeat?
That part was terrific. I have found, particularly in this playoff run, and when I mentioned sort of earlier on about Dak Prescott as a DVOA champion but doesn't actually win, like I really want Mahomes to keep winning as much as he can if it's not going to be Seattle, because I'm just absolutely infatuated with the guy and watching him play. And I really hope that he gets the tangible wins that match it, because I just find him so enthralling. And I found myself in the last, the fourth and fifth quarters, basically on my feet for a lot of it when the Chiefs had the ball on offense, like really willing him to win as much as the Niners to lose. Like, I don't mind Kyle Shanahan. There's a lot of the Niners that doesn't do it for me, but they've beaten the brakes off us so badly recently that it hasn't felt like much of a needle rivalry like it did in the great Carroll Harbaugh days, where you were just desperate for them to lose. And hopefully we'll get back to that, and it can be that kind of real hatred-based rivalry that it has been. But yeah, I just found it so enthralling to watch Mahomes like just do exactly what he needed to do to win in the biggest spots on 2 or 3 occasions. That was a pretty memorable one for me. I think I loved it.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I mean, I don't find this Niners team that dislikable. I find the stuff with the big, what's it, a boom box when they're coming out a bit cringy. But apart from that, I actually find them, I'm jealous. I want to play as well as they do. And they are consistently in the Super Bowl or the NFC Championship game. And I am jealous of that. But they are still the Niners. And therefore, I immediately after the Super Bowl, I kind of felt a bit bad for them in a way. Like I felt like the Baltimore Super Bowl loss and the last Chiefs one were just hilarious. Whereas this felt more, that'd really suck if you were them. Like that if I was a Niners fan, or if that was the Seahawks and they kept getting there and not winning, it would actually get to the point of it'd get you down. And I started feeling that way. And I like Mahomes. I'm with you, Adam. I really like Mahomes. I don't have the stuff that people get wound up with the Chiefs. That doesn't bother me at all. And I enjoyed seeing him win another one. And I would like the Seahawks to show the Niners how it's done one day in a Super Bowl against Mahomes. That would be nice. But I think 7 days on, I'm enjoying the fallout of the Niners loss. And Robbie, one of the key things is they're now looking for a defensive coordinator. It does seem, and maybe this is premature, it does feel a little bit like things are not quite as connected with the Niners as it used to be. I've already listened to one segment with somebody suggest, I can't remember who did it, but it was somebody prominent in the media suggesting maybe Cal needs to go somewhere else. Maybe he needs to go somewhere else and start again and a fresh start. They're looking for a defensive coordinator because Kyle fell out just didn't have a connection with the last one. Well, why appoint him then? Like the Seahawks seem to be doing a lot of work to make sure they're getting the right guys. Looks like Kyle Shanahan just picked somebody who was a name to be his defensive coordinator. He is going to have a hard job eventually getting these guys to keep dealing with misery at the end of seasons and defeat and keep getting them back. You can't just keep going back to the Super Bowl. It's not as easy as that. They've already, the fact that they got back there as soon as they have is an achievement in itself within 3 years. Can they keep going, Robbie? Are they, Debo's getting older, Kittle's getting older, Trent Williams is getting older, Christian McCaffrey's getting older. They're a year away from having to make a decision on Brock Purdy's contract. Purdy played well in the Super Bowl. He can't throw it deep. He executes what Kyle Shanahan needs, but he's not an explosive downfield passer. And they clearly have a lot of talented players, but it does feel, Robbie, as if they're nearer the end of the run with this group than they are perhaps in the peak of this run with this group.
Yeah, I think they're closer to the end than anything. This is definitely the start of probably their downfall. Depends on how they draft as well, but I mean, I will say this Niners team, you're right. It was much easier to hate the Harbaugh Niners team than this one. Colin Kaepernick and Michael Crabtree, I just hated those guys. Just hated them, And this team is I actually like Dre Greenlaw and actually felt so bad for him running onto the field and he tore his Achilles. What a terrible way to go down. I just felt terrible for that guy. And they did like a pregame special on him, kind of his story. And man, what a cool dude and what he's been through. And it just a terrible way to go down and just something so mundane and running onto the field. But I gotta be honest, I enjoyed them losing. It brought me a lot of joy. I was really happy to watch them lose because I hate the what is it? Bang Bang Diner King. I hate that saying. It pisses me off. So I don't want to hear that. And I got enough 49er friends that it was nice to see them, crying their own little tears, and I have to deal with them, telling me, oh, now we have 6 Super Bowls or whatever. And I was like, yeah, that's the first one you've ever been alive for. All right. I just tired of hearing it. But yeah, I mean, this team is the Niners team is, but I mean, they're hard to dislike. I mean, there's a few players. I mean, I don't really love Kittle's little thing that he does, when he gets a first down. That kind of pisses me off, but I don't know. They're a team that's not like, I don't really.
Do you know what the amazing thing is that they lost the game they should have won, the Super Bowl, and won the 2 playoff games they should have lost.
Yeah.
To the Packers and the Lions. So I guess it all works out in the end. I'm looking forward to, if there was ever anything, guys, that it seems almost strange now to think that it was even a discussion that the Seahawks had to move on from Pete Carroll. But if there was ever anything that made me think that when I look back now, I think, God, it should have just been so obvious to everybody. It was that freaking Thanksgiving Day game when the Seahawks just, they admitted after the game they were not properly prepared to play the biggest game of the season that so far against the Niners, and just came out. And as I was sat watching it, Robbie, in those fantastic seats that you got for us, I just could imagine Kyle smoking a cigar on the sideline, or Kyle just sort of sat, that head coach is usually stood on the sideline, that he was actually sort of sat down on the bench, just watching, very relaxed, because it was so easy for the Niners. They just turned up and won the game. It was a saunter. And that can't be the way. It just cannot be that easy for them anymore. And I don't think it's going to be. I think this change is necessary so that we can give the Niners a game. The Packers should, and the Lions, who we beat in Detroit, should not be able to give the Niners a game while we roll over and have a tummy tickle from Kyle Shanahan. And that hopefully will not be the case in 2024. Okay, so they're going to go off and lick the wounds. And try
I will say I find it interesting now that you watch back some of this tape and how they were not prepared for the overtime, the Niners, at all. They had no idea what the rules were.
What a mess.
What a disaster. How do you not know that going into the biggest game of the year? That was crazy.
I mean, I had no idea what was going on. I mean, I don't know if the NFL did it. I mean, they have to know because they're playing in the game. I'm watching it in Rotherham. So, they have to know. But I did not understand, like when the Niners were going for it, I was like, so if they score a touchdown here, do they win? And then I was like, okay, so no, there's a guaranteed possession each. But then the time was ticking. Were either of you watching the Chiefs at the end of the first quarter thinking, run a play. There's like, you're running out of time. And then somebody like Romo or someone went, oh, there's another quarter to come. And I was like, why? Like, what are we doing here? So then they scored and it was like, okay, they've won, whatever. It was really confusing, but they did not know. And Adam, Robbie's right to bring that up. And it's a lesson to everybody else. There was no I don't think any benefit to going first. Because if you get the ball first, Kyle's excuse was that we wanted the ball third. Yeah, but then you give Mahomes a chance to win. You give Mahomes, if Mahomes could have gone for every fourth down because he had to score. So they could they had that extra down every time they got to fourth down up until they got into scoring position. If they scored the touchdown, they could have decided to go for 2 to win it there and then, and you never get the ball for the third time. It just seems like there was no real benefit to playing for the third possession. I mean, even if you were aggressive on San Francisco's first drive to get the 7, you still give him Mahomes 4 downs every single time. He knows he's got that. Like, that was a complete cluster from Kyle Shanahan, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think, and there's been a lot of revisiting it, and you think in your own mind, what would I have done in that situation? I reckon a lot of us were sat on the couch when we weren't quite sure what the rules were, thinking this Niners defense looks gassed and they need a break. So the Niners may want the ball just to do that. But look, I mean, if Nick Bosa doesn't crash down ridiculously twice and allow Mahomes on a read option to convert 2 fourth downs, maybe we're looking at saying, Shanahan's a genius. Yes, it does appear when you look back at it and you break it down with a cold head that you would obviously want the ball second, because at least if the first team scores a touchdown, you're going for 2, every fourth down is in play. But I just wonder if maybe there's a little bit of revisionism after the fact that has a little bit of sort of confirmation by what actually happened at the end of it. I don't know. I don't know if I very much doubt the conversation would be had if Bosa had held the edge and sussed Mahomes out on that down. But I suppose that's that's his greatness, that he knew what to do. And on fourth down, the cold heads prevailed of the Chiefs.
Yeah, Patrick Mahomes, not just a legendary quarterback now, but may possess the biggest pair of spuds we will ever see. Because to go into the numerous situations he was in, where he needed to score, needed to lead a drive, and he did it, and almost looked like he didn't break sweat, like he was just going for a Sunday stroll while he was doing it, and keep that composure and that calmness. It really, when you place that alongside his obvious talent, is why he could well do the unthinkable and usurp Brady and his number of championships in his career. We will see. Right, I want to head back to the Seahawks, guys, and talk a bit about. So we mentioned, we obviously mentioned the situation with Jordan Brooks. Who else do you see? I mean, let's start with the free agents. So Leonard Williams, Robbie, yes or no? Will he be back next year? Do you want him back next year?
Want him back next year. I worry he's going to end up somewhere like the Rams.
Oh dear. Well, that would be a disaster. Adam, yeah, do you think he'll be back, and do you want him back?
I think there's a lot less pressure to keep him now that it's not the same regime in charge that made the trade in the first place. I think Schneider could probably just about twist enough words around and saying, look, in a way of saying, Pete really wanted this guy, and so we just did what it took to try and give the head coach what he wanted. I think with a new head coach, they would protect. If there was a live stream straight after Pete Carroll and Schneider couldn't get Williams signed, we'd be going apoplectic. I kind of feel like if it happens now, we'll be a bit more circumspect on it. Although he does strike me as a player that any head coach would want, and that seems, put your resources into really good players in the trenches is never going to be a bad idea as far as I'm concerned.
I think they're going to do what it takes to keep him, because I think that they will see that as they have been looking for an interior defensive lineman for ages. And I think that they will view this as their opportunity to get that done and take all the pressure off that off-season need. Because if Leonard Williams walks, they have to find somebody else. And that's going to be so hard. Justin Madubuike, I think, will be franchised, or will just sign a deal to stay in Baltimore. I don't see them getting into bidding wars for Christian Wilkins. I think Chris Jones is going to be back. I mean, Chris Jones would be mad to leave the Chiefs. Like everybody would be mad to leave the Chiefs. Stay with the Chiefs. You've just got to make sure that you sort of latch on to the coattails of Mahomes. So I think this is their best chance to find. I think they will match any offer. It may be more expensive than perhaps some people project, but I think they'll do whatever it takes to keep him so that they know they've got him. And then when the Seahawks have Williams and Jaron Reed and Cam Young, and they could probably add someone in the draft as well, I think they'll feel pretty good about that situation. So I think he will stay, and I want him to stay, and I'm not too worried about how much it costs. Bobby Wagner, do you want him to stay? And do you think he will stay?
I'm going to go no on both of them. I don't, not a knock on Bobby. I love Bobby Wagner, everything he's done for Seattle. I just think it's time to move on and get a little younger. I think kind of as Adam just said, with the new regime, it's easier to move on. That's one of Pete's guys. I know John was there to draft him as well, but I think it's time.
Adam?
Yeah, not too much more to add. Sports are supposed to be fun. There's a bit of emotion to it. Seeing your legends play for your own team is nice. So if Wagner is playing next year, I'm not going to be gutted by it. But I can't see. I don't know. I can't see where the sense would be, or who would sort of negotiate on their principles enough to keep him. Is Wagner going to take not a lot of money? Are the Seahawks going to want to pay him? I don't really see where the negotiation doesn't hit a big roadblock, to be honest, on that one.
I think he's going to go to the Commanders and sort of be a leader on the field for Dan Quinn. That's my guess. And I would, same as what Robbie said, it's not that you're not to be disrespectful. I'm ready for him to move on now. I think the Seahawks need young, fast, physical. Noah Fant, Robbie, Do you want him to stay or not? And do you think he will stay or not?
Short on this one, I would be interested to see how Ryan Grubb uses him, and to see if that is something that, something that would benefit the team. I don't know. I feel like there's talent in the draft at the tight end position. I feel like, and that we can get a little younger, and he's still a relatively young guy, so I guess that's not really an issue. But I just don't know how much he's going to cost either. I think we can spend our resources elsewhere. I guess I'd like to see him stay, but I just know how realistic it is.
Adam?
I'm really not fussed either way on this one. I remember when Jimmy Graham was sort of setting records of scoring touchdowns for the Seahawks, and there were still fans that were really hating on him. I feel like Fant is the level that people thought Jimmy Graham was when they didn't rate him. Like he's fine. I think he's a bit. NFL players aren't soft. I think he is comparably on the softer side of what you're looking for from a tight end. I think he's a bit of a finesse player. And he strikes me as someone that's going to want more money than the Seahawks should be comfortable paying, I think.
I think he will be back. And I would be very open to bringing him back because I think this is a poor tight end draft. I think the free agent options are severely limited. And the offense that Ryan Grubb uses, I think, needs somebody like Fant. So I'm open to bringing him back to see if... Look, the Pete Carroll era was full of tight ends that were never really featured much in the passing game, and I think that's going to change. And I think there's a reason why he was a top 20 pick. I think it's been poor for him to be stuck in, the Carroll sort of system and the Broncos when they were bad. I think there's a player in there. And I just wonder whether he just needs that opportunity to shine in a system that will get the most out of him. So I think it will depend on salary and how much interest he has elsewhere. But I would be interested in bringing him back. I think that they're the three that I would be interested in bringing back: Leonard Williams, Jordan Brooks, and Noah Fant. I think everybody else I'm kind of like pretty meh on bringing back. Okay, so to pivot now to finish with the players that might go. So, Robbie, do you think Jamal Adams will be back next year or not?
No, there's no way. No.
Adam?
I gotta say, seeing so many people in the comments saying get rid of Adams, thankfully I'm reading it closely. It can make me feel quite self-conscious. It's screwing me up. Get rid of Adam. No, okay, Jamal. Okay, I get it. I mean, no. There's no conceivable reason to keep him at all. Get rid.
No, he's
get rid.
Yeah. Draw a line, move on, get rid. What about Quandre Diggs, Robbie?
Yeah, I would like to see him gone. I'm ready to move on from both the safeties.
Adam?
I think it's probably sensible to get rid. I'm slightly cautious of how many players you're going to get rid of all in one go. But it's certainly not one that I would care either way, which is probably the best way to say don't spend $20 million on a bloke if that's the reason. With the money that he is on, it doesn't seem to make much sense that you would keep him. But if they were able to do a restructure, extend it by a couple of years or whatever, I wouldn't hate it. I think he certainly has a lot more to offer than Jamal does.
I'm with Robbie on this one. I think the $21.2 million cap hit is just ridiculous. I mean, how on earth has it come to pass that Quandre Diggs could have a $21.2 million cap hit? I think he's on his third contract already, sort of extending it and pushing the money down. Eventually you are going to have to move on from Quandre Diggs. So I think Julian Love should be the consistent veteran safety. I'm led to believe, again, I'm not an X's and O's expert by any stretch, that Mike Macdonald likes the 3 safety looks. I have studied the safety class a little bit closer in the last couple of weeks. I'm a huge Malik Mustafa fan at Wake Forest. I think he is Buda Baker. I've given him a second round grade. I think he is just such... I want to come out of this draft with Malik Mustafa at Wake Forest. Go and watch him on YouTube, guys, if you've not seen him. Everybody in the chat, go and watch him. I think he's fast, physical, and brilliant. So I want that at safety. I want fast, physical, dynamic players, young players. So I go and get Malik Mustafa. The other player that I've really warmed to is Kitten Oladapo at Oregon State. I think he's bigger, about 220, hits, covers better than he's have any right to at his size. I think he and Mustafa are both good characters, the kind of people you want on your defense. I'd be very open to going after those two guys and just being, there. Mustafa might be there round 3, round 4. Oladapo has been projected round 4, round 5. I've got Mustafa graded in round 2 and Oladapo graded in round 3. I'd happily just go and add a couple of young defensive backs, that back end, to play with Julian Love and go with that. And look, there were no, Kyle Hamilton was like the big prize. I think Mustafa can do that kind of role. I think Oladapo can do that kind of role. I think Devin Witherspoon can do that kind of role. And one of the other players that I really like in the draft is TJ Tampa, the cornerback at Iowa State. If you could get him and play him outside with either Reek Woolen or Michael Jackson and play Devin Witherspoon in that Kyle Hamilton role, I think that could be serious for the Seahawks. I think that'd be really good. So that's the I'd go young and fast at the safeties. What about Draymond Jones? What do you see his future as, Robbie? Do you think he'll be on the team next year?
I'm guessing yes, because his contract just get like guaranteed or something like that. I thought he would. I thought he'd be gone, but I think he'll be back.
I don't think he'll be back, Adam. So I just sort of explain why. I think that they will feel that he is a cap saving down the line. So what I mean is, I don't think he's going to be cut in like the next few weeks. I think I think trading him, yeah, okay. So if they traded him before June the 1st, they would only make a $4.8 million saving. If they trade him after June the 1st, they save $11.5 million. So what I think is likely is that they will take him into training camp and try and shift him in training camp. If he goes to camp and is brilliant and fits the defense, they won't move him. But I think if he just doesn't quite fit, or if he's underwhelming in camp, they'll just flip him either for another, like a player swap or a late round pick or something. And that $11.5 million that they save might allow them to go and do what Baltimore did a year ago and go and get whoever's left on the market, Jadeveon Clowney and Cal Van Noy, who ended up leading the NFL in they helped the Ravens lead the NFL in sacks, didn't they? So that's what I think is going to happen, that Draymond Jones will be here until camp, and then if he doesn't perform, he'll move on. What do you think, Adam? Because he was underwhelming in year one, wasn't he? But that might be down to the Seahawks as much as it is Draymond Jones.
Yeah, I suppose when you can make savings after having a look at a bloke as opposed to having to do things early, you may as well. I think Curtis is saying something about his contract there that I'll let you read whilst I'm talking. It seems to make sense that you'd have a look at the guy if you can, and then see where we are. He was signed for a reason on big money. You might as well see if there's something in it, and if there's not, get rid. Because he was huge underwhelming last year. Let's be honest. There was so much to talk about last year that we probably didn't talk about the big free agent signing, but he was given them the biggest contract in free agency that the Seahawks had ever given out, I think, at that time of the year. And he was terrible, really, against his contract for what we paid, what we got back. So, yeah, if you can have a look and then get rid, I think that's probably the ideal situation.
Yes, Curtis has come back and said that it's not an 11.5 million saving; it's only 4.5. I'm just using over the cap, so if that has changed, they need to update their system, because it does say on the over the cap system that a trade post June 1st would be an $11.5 million saving. So perhaps that is a mistake on their behalf, but that is what they are saying at the moment. Although if you do the post June 1st cut for Draymond Jones, it has updated now to only a $4.5 million saving. So perhaps they've just not updated their trade for post June 1st yet. and that's possibly just an error, or they just haven't got around to doing it. So, so he may not be an option to move on from after all. And always appreciate Curtis joining in. Okay, so hang on a minute. He's just said, "Oh, you're right. Post June 1st. I misunderstood." Curtis, you've confused us all. Right? Okay. Maybe it's a possibility after all. Everything I said. So if Curtis has just got it wrong, then at least on Over the Cap, they're saying trade post June 1st, aka in training camp. Over the Cap says $11.5 million saving. If that is true, I think there's a chance that will happen. If he doesn't light it up, they'll just flip him. They'll just flip him in training camp and save some money. Okay, so there we are. I think the last one to discuss is Tyler Lockett. Robbie, what do you think they're going to do with Tyler Lockett?
I think he'll still be here. I know he's like 16 million saved if we got rid of him. I think we're gonna keep him. I think there's money to be saved elsewhere, and I don't see a reason to get rid of him right now.
Adam?
I am going to say what my co-host Stu said all the time, and he said it for the last 3 years, and at some point he has to be right. I think he's going to retire. I think they're going to try and move him and he'll retire because I think he probably is happy with his lot. Again, I'm not basing that on anything apart from that has to happen at some point. And the way he's played a little bit in the last couple of years, looks like he's looking after himself a little bit better. And he strikes me as the kind that if they were going to move him to a place where he wasn't going to be super happy, he might just call it quits. You know, it was interesting hearing Travis Kelce say that if Andy Reid left the Chiefs, he'd be walking straight out the door with him. And Tyler strikes me as that kind of guy that he loves the situation he's in. And yeah, if he was moved, I think he'd retire.
My opinion on this was really influenced watching what's his name? It's the QB School YouTube channel. JJ, he was the former Niners quarterback. I can't remember his name. Someone will mention it in the chat. And I watched the drive that Drew Lock had against the Eagles. JT Sullivan, that's it. I knew someone would help out in the chat. JT Sullivan. I was really shocked how half-arsed Tyler Lockett was on that game-winning drive. Like, there were a couple of routes where I don't know if it was the game-winning drive or it was the whole game. I can't remember. But there was a few moments in that game where Tyler Lockett just looked like he either wasn't doing what he was supposed to be doing, like he wasn't putting maximum effort in, and it didn't feel very Tyler Lockett to me. And that was in the complete contrast to DK Metcalf, who balled out at the end of that game to win that game for the Seahawks. And it just made me think, is Tyler at the end? Is he sort of going through the motions a little bit here? We've already been seeing for the last couple of years that he chucks himself on the floor at the nearest sign of any defender because he doesn't want contact. And that's fine. I've got no issue with that. I'm not criticizing him for that, but that's how he started to play. And I don't know whether he will retire I don't know whether they'll try and trade him and that will provoke him to retire, rather that they might already have an idea of what he's going to do. But his cap hit is just... So the cap hit for now is, let me find it, $27 million. Like that's a lot of money. $27 million for Tyler Lockett. And you can save $17 million with a post-June 1st cut. That could be a Leonard Williams deal right there. And then I look on my horizontal board. It's really useful at a time like this, guys, because I just look at the board and every position's kind of like, there's a few there, and there's a few there, and there's a few there. And then there's receiver. Just a great big long line of players all the way filled out in rounds 2 and 3. And I've been on the Sports Ski to Mock Draft Simulator non-stop for the last week. and I've been able to trade down. I don't take the mick with the trades. I don't just trade and get, I try and be realistic. But I've been able to get sort of in the 3rd round and in the 4th round, stuff like that. And like Jalen Polk will be there. And I'm thinking, Ryan Grubb, potentially Michael Penix, Jalen Polk's a dog. I don't mean a husky. I mean an actual, he is gritty as hell. Like, he was highlighted as a guy who will just give absolutely everything, play through everything. Just screams Seahawks to me in that terms of attitude. Has to run well at the combine, and then there's others. You can just run through it. Here are all the players that I have graded in round 2 and 3 at receiver: Xavier Legette, Lad McConkey, Jalen McKillen, Troy Franklin, Jalen Polk, Brian Thomas, Malachi Corley, Roman Wilson, Keon Coleman, Luke McCaffrey, Jermaine Burton, Jacob Cowan, Brendan Rice, Tez Walker, Ricky Pearsall, Xavier Worth, Adonai Mitchell. That's a long list of receivers. They might not be Tyler Lockett as a rookie, but it just feels like you could get one of those guys for $1 million and save $17 million, and that's the harsh reality of the NFL. This is kind of the final thing we're going to talk about, guys. So does that make sense to you guys, that you would possibly just go down that road? And then maybe once you do it, Tyler does just call it a day and doesn't want to play anywhere else. Or maybe you just go, hey, I'll go and play for the Chiefs for a year and try and get a Super Bowl ring. That could be an option as well. But I just think that is a tougher one than I think people realize. And I think that 17 million saving, given you can have 2 post June 1st cuts, you can do it to Adams and to Tyler Lockett, just seems to make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I'd like to change my answer. I thought it was 16 million. I thought I'll probably just keep it. I didn't know it was 27 million. So yes, okay. I changed my answer to, I think that's probably fair. Fair to say that.
And as someone has pointed out, Jake Bobo could expand his role slightly. I think Bobo is a great wide receiver 4 rather than ever going to be a great wide receiver 3. But I think there's just so many options in the draft. And Adam, you could always just sign a cheap receiver, couldn't you? There's always somebody, a veteran that you can get for a couple of $1 million who could come in and do a job. Those players do hang around. I mean, the Chiefs have just won a Super Bowl with signing players like that. And they've had a lot of troubles at receiver as well. But, they don't have DK Metcalf or Jackson Smith and Jigba either, do they? So...
No, agreed. I mean, if there was going to be a position where you had to look to find someone, let it be receiver. Because, look, you're going to want to start maximizing your 1st round pick from last year in JSN. DK is obviously going to get his targets. So, straight away there, you'd think that, I don't know how the percentages work, but you're looking for a wide receiver 3 in actuality, and you're certainly not spending $27 million on one of those. So, just go and get one. Unless Tyler wants to take a super team friendly deal, why would he do that? I don't know, unless he loves playing that much. But it doesn't seem like, as you said in the thing about the Eagles game, and I get it. Enough hits now. He's got a thriving business, got a great life to look forward to, and if he can kind of ease his way out, then I wouldn't blame him in the slightest.
Well, we'll see what happens. There's some options there, but the Seahawks have to do something, and this is the other reason why. And I've not mentioned Geno Smith in this run because I feel like we've already gone over that. But you're also talking about, for some of these players, the salary that comes off the books for next year. So at the moment, the Seahawks have, for 2025, they have $22.5 million in effective cap space, which is not much for 2025. But the minute you start moving on some of these players who do have big contracts, that will grow. Like, for example, if you get rid of Jamal Adams this year, you will have some relief. They'll split the dead cap hit as opposed to June 1st in 2. So you will have it will cost you 10 million rather than 27. So you'll save, that's 28, right? Actually. So you'll save about $18 million to add on to that. Geno Smith, if you just trade him this year, will save you $33.7 million. Tyler Lockett, if he'll cost you 9.8 instead of $27 million. So Draymond Jones, another one, his cap number for 2025 is 23.1 million. So you could realistically save 50, 60, 70, best part of $100 million by moving on some of these players for 2025. It's not just 2024 that you're looking at here. This is why they need to reset some of this roster, It's why they should be prepared to take a sort of more long-term view this offseason looking ahead. I hope they will do that. I think they are going to do that because the key is to build towards a Super Bowl title contention in the next few years. It isn't just to try and be as good as possible in 2024. Anyway, we've got through loads of topics there. The live views numbers have been fantastic. So thank you to everybody who has been watching along. Robbie and Adam, it has been a pleasure to speak to you again. I hope we can do it again soon. We've got some big events coming up. Robbie, are you going to the Combine?
Oh yeah, I'll be there. I think
awesome.
the only day I won't be there is Friday.
Sweet.
Yep.
Perfect. Great to have boots on the ground in the Combine again. So very much looking forward to that. So we've got some big things coming up. SeahawksDraftBlog.com for more analysis. Make sure you like the video. That definitely always helps. Leave a comment. That always helps as well. But the best thing you can do is subscribe. So if you haven't subscribed yet, please do that. Until next time, bye for now.